Good evening, everyone, and nice to see you again. Welcome to our second part of Transforming Communities webinar series. This week we are in Vaasa, but we are going to handle Närpiö, Närpes, which is located about 80 kilometers from here on the western area of Finland. I have lovely guests here today. I have Anja Kuusisto. She is the editor of Sydösterbotten, which is a local newspaper published in Närpes and in Kristiinan kaupunki. Then we have Mikko Hautakangas. You're a researcher from Tampere University. You're also an active member of Conciliatory Journalism. Did I say it correct?
Yes, that's right.
And then I have Hanna Hietikko. You're also a journalist and a teacher and the editor of student media called Pomedia.
Yes.
Okay. Welcome. We will soon continue to our discussion, but let's start by getting introduction about Närpes and a little bit talking about the multicultural nature of the town, as well as the integration. So we visited Närpes recently with our small team and did some interviews that would give you a bit of a better description of the town. So let's start with the video. Feel free to use the chat while we talk. You can ask questions in there and we can also come back to your questions during our discussion. But let's start with the video.
So Jennifer and Tui, welcome and happy to have you today. We are going to have a discussion about Närpes and how the immigration transformed the community here. And since you are the experts here in this field, how do you describe Närpes?
I can answer to that. I would say that Närpes is a multicultural city with many cultures living in it. So if we compare to before, we have many more cultures here than we used to have.
If we compare for like 30 years ago, that when Närpes people they meet a foreigner here, it's like a little bit curious that who are you and where are you from? But in this moment that we have a huge with foreigner people, so it's like foreigner peoples and Närpes people is the same. We don't see the difference.
Okay, that's very interesting to hear. And do you think this is because the labor migration in Närpes, because Närpes is very significant in labor migration? What do you think?
I think that this has a big role in it because we have a big labor force here in Närpes. They usually work in the greenhouses, but also in the metal industry and elsewhere. But I think that's the significance in Närpes. That we have such a big labor force compared to the cities that are around Närpes as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think basically in greenhouse, because 60% of the tomato, I think, is coming from Närpes in Finland.
Yes.
Yes. And how do you, as a council or the city council, provide this integration services to the international here or migrants?
We have Tui that works here, and then we have Aida that is at Welcome Office, and then we have a translator also. Mm-hmm. And I'm the more coordinating person then. Yes. Okay. So we provide different informations and help with them with different things and to fill in papers and whatever they.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
And in this regard, it's said that there are 30 nationalities, 30 different nationalities here and 30 different languages spoken in Närpes.
In the beginning, so it was the boss from Bosnia. But
Bosnia.
now is the Vietnamese people.
Mm. In the 80s, 90s, was the Bosnian?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And do you have like exact numbers, how many they are here?
It's quite a challenge for us to know exactly with the number of people because the labor migrants that they come by themselves and we didn't notice how many is coming.
Okay.
So that's a challenge for us.
So you don't have a record for everyone comes here?
No.
Okay.
And that, like Tui said, that's also a problem, because then we can't know about them and give them or provide them the information that we would want to.
Exactly.
So that's something that we would like to change also, that we know about who comes here to work here,
Yes.
so we can help them and give the information about the society that they need.
So any plans like to
Yes, we have some
to
plans.
provide
Yes.
to improve the situation and to
Yes.
have more like supervision and control?
Yes, we have written also a letter to the state in Finland about this, and that we would like a change in the law, that everybody that comes here would have to go through a like course where you learn about the society, and maybe also a small course of like Swedish or Finnish, so you understand the basics also. Because in that way also we would get them to get the right information about the society, because now we have also noticed that maybe they get the information but it could be wrong, or it could be from someone who isn't maybe so integrated and know all the things about the society that we want to provide them with.
Okay. So how do you evaluate the integration process of the people who are working here?
Or a good integration, I would say, that depends a lot on yourself. You have to be interested also to learn the language, to get the information from somewhere. It isn't just the society's role. It's also your own responsibility.
Yes. And you have to be active and
you have
to engage in so many activities and okay.
Yes. So I think we will provide the right information, at least, to gives really good information to them, and she has a good contact web also, I would say, to reach out to them. But of course we could be better. If we could get the information, like I said, about who's coming here, we could do even more.
Yes. Okay. So do you think the integration services provided to asylum seekers and refugees are being also provided to the migrants or the labor-based migrants, or is it different?
It's really different. Yeah. The labor force immigrants, I would say, they have to be more active themselves. The asylum seekers get the service from somewhere. So that's the difference, I would say.
Yes. For the refugees, in the beginning, they have time to learn the language. They have time to get the information about the society. But for the labor force migrant, that they start direct to work at the first day when they come to Finland. And it means that they have 8 or more than 8 hours working per day, and then so it's time for family time, and they don't have so much time to contact with the community. Yes. So that's why it's a big challenge for them to integrate.
Yes. And they are just repeating the cycle every day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So, in your opinion, what are the efforts done by the council here to recruit migrants? Or are you recruiting from Finland or just international from outside? What are your reflections about that?
I would say that we are recruiting from the outside, not from Finland. And I would say that maybe the council doesn't have so much input in this thing. It's more the greenhouses that are trying to affect people or trying to get them here. But of course we are trying to affect them by providing example of support and different services for them, so that they will feel welcome and want to live here.
So, how, if we are going to talk about the effects of this labor migration here in Närpes, how do you see it affected the community here?
We see that the street picture has changed a lot, and also like in stores, we see there are many Vietnamese stores here. So I would say maybe the positive part is that we have a multicultural society. We have many cultures that we can learn from, that have lived here long, and they can live or learn from our culture also. So we get an exchange in the culture, which is really nice, I think. Yes. What do you think, Tui?
In addition that we see that they have such a lot of positive effects. We see the economy has been growing fast, and we see that many the school has been built. We make a bigger capacity for like at the healthcare center, and also the daycare. The Närpes council has built a lot of the daycare center, bigger and bigger.
That's very nice to hear. So it's like a coherent society.
Yes.
And we have many assistants that who can speak Vietnamese language
In
to
the
be there.
daycares?
Yes, in the
Okay.
daycare support, and also at school.
Okay.
But that we maybe also see as one negative aspect. If we talk about negative aspects as well, in some classes there are 12 out of 15 children have another language than Swedish. So that can be a problem both for them to learn Swedish, because then they have the common language that they don't need to speak Swedish. And also for the Swedish speaking also, that they don't maybe get the education that a class with only Swedish speaking would get. So we see the negative aspects for both these groups, because they don't learn Swedish as good as if it was a smaller group.
Exactly.
And also the other group doesn't learn maybe or doesn't get the same education, because then if we have another group where it's only Swedish speaking or just a few native speaking students, then they can proceed with the education much faster.
Exactly.
So that I would say that maybe it's one of the small negative effects. But
So how do you see, Jennifer and Tui, the media coverage of recent situation of Närpes? How do you see that affected the community here?
I would say that it affected it negative, because the focus was put on many others, like our community and also the Vietnamese people that aren't really involved in this. So I think the focus was put on the wrong places. And I also think that the people that aren't involved in this are affected, because many see, for example, now Vietnamese as are all of them like involved in this, which they aren't. And so I think that the ones that did this, that were actually involved in it, the focus wasn't put on them, but instead on the society and all the other people also.
Okay. And this changed the image of Närpes?
Yes, it has. Okay. Some of the people have wrote that, or written that we don't want to buy the tomatoes or the cucumbers from Närpes, which has nothing to do with this case.
Okay. So, Tui, what kind of support are you providing to the immigrants?
We give information in Vietnamese, like the information about the Finnish society, that they know their equal rights to be a citizen in Finland, and or the benefit that the child can get like in Finland, because we don't have such benefit in Vietnam. So it's a big difference to compare from in Vietnam and in Finland.
Okay, okay. And it's good for them to know all this information once they come.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's a different society and a very new environment.
It's a huge
for them.
difference.
Yes, yes. And since you are speaking the same language with them, which is Vietnamese, I think they are confiding.
Yes, really confiding to speak their own language.
So what kind of struggles or problems do they have?
All kinds of trouble. like a tax, because in Vietnam that we don't have the tax card. Yes. So the first thing that people need to do in Finland that they have to register at the DVV. Yes. And get the tax card, and they have to apply for the bank account. Yes. So there's many things that they need to know about, and get the FBA card.
As you mentioned earlier, that most of them are working in the greenhouse, and usually the greenhouse work is very demanding and challenging physically and mentally. Mm-hmm. So it's normal that most of them can get sick of this work. So have you been reported that some of them can come to you and they say that I got sick because of work? How do you react?
Actually, that is not only the papers work, but also that sometimes I become the listener, I become the supervisor, and I just be there and listen to them. That makes them feel that they feel comfortable for that, so that they become to open more with me, such as the problems at work or family or with their kids, or also with the community that they feel alone and they need more friends surround them. So it's a lot of things that I'm doing with my customer.
Do you also prepare some kind of activities here for people?
Of course, before the COVID, the pandemic, that we have more time to meet each other, that we used to be here in this room, meet every Friday. And Jennifer also have a big event for hobbies.
Yes, because I have been thinking about how to include them more in the society, how to get them more involved in hobbies. So I was like, yes, how should we do this? So I have discussed with Tui and my colleagues and my boss and so on. So we're going to arrange a day in probably August this year, where we're going to have different like football, ice hockey, dancing, whatever hobbies that we have in Närpes. We're going to gather them, and then people can come and take part of what can I do as a hobby in Närpes. So in that way, we're going to have probably more immigrants in the in the hobbies as well.
Yeah, I think so. It will be very refreshing for them.
Yes.
So life is not just work and home.
Exactly, and that's what we're striving for.
Exactly.
That's what we want.
That sounds promising.
Yeah.
So Nu, we are happy to have you today, and I would like to know more about your story. So when did you come to Närpes and with whom?
I came Närpes February 2011. I came with my husband. My relative in Finland, they are, he have a five job for me in greenhouse working, and because that we came Finland working in greenhouse.
Okay, so for how long did you work there?
I am work in greenhouse from 4 years. After that, because I have some problem with back, so heavy for me in greenhouse. Because that's when 4 year working in greenhouse finished, I study.
So Nu, after spending almost 11 years here in Närpes, do you feel it's home for you?
Yes, really feel this in Finland, in Närpes. This is my home. I feel like that because all my family, they are living in Finland, in Närpes, and my children also, they don't want to come back Vietnam.
Okay, so Nu, what is the difference between 11 years ago and now when you came to Närpes?
Yes, in the beginning I came in Närpes. In Närpes they have people from Vietnam, but not so much people. But from now, they have so much people from Vietnam around in Närpes. Example for my family, in beginning just only me as my husband coming, but now only from my family, relative and my friend. I think maybe something for 100 people now in Närpes. We feel so happy when people in Vietnam can come in Finland and they have a job in Finland, and we're very happy when we come. We feel in Närpes the same home, same, because we have so many people from Vietnam. Because that's why we have many two ASEAN markets from Närpes, because we need to have food, ASEAN food for people in Närpes.
Okay. Now, how do you see the impact or the role of the Vietnamese immigrants here in Närpes?
11 years before from today, this means now we have so much people came in Närpes for working, because that's now many, before they have so little greenhouse, and now this greenhouse growing so much. They have so many greenhouse, because that's in Närpes. I think now they have a little big city, and we can have many markets, example from Asian market or restaurant, Asian restaurant. Means this worker, so many workers come in Närpes, and we are thinking this for worker and give for in Närpes more grow. We know in Finland not so many place, but from Närpes in big place for greenhouse, and vegetable grow so quickly, and they are said with me, every vegetable, tomato or cucumber and paprika in Närpes give for around in Finland.
Yeah. So do you think this is a positive impact?
This positive impact, really positive, yes.
And it helps the city to grow.
Yes, exactly. For me, I think like that, but I don't know other people what they are thinking.
Thank you so much, Nu.
Yeah.
It was really a pleasure having you and having this nice chit-chat with you.
Yeah. Okay, yes, thank you anyway. And from here, I want to say thank you with Finland, thank you with Närpes, and important, thank you with from all bought in greenhouse. They growing and they give for us working, and we happy like that. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Here we get a shortest introduction to the labor migration in Närpes, and also a little bit of reflections on the pros and cons that they are facing in there. But Anja, as you are working as the editor in Sydösterbotten, which is the local newspaper, what kind of thoughts this video brought into your mind? What's the impact of migration in Närpes in your opinion?
First, I have to say I really recognize the society they are speaking about. It's the place where our newspaper Sydösterbotten is produced. Yes, Närpes is, in my mindset, it's a small agricultural rural community, and it has changed a lot during the last decades. I grew up there, but I've been away for more than 30 years, and I can tell, I see it with my eyes how different it is. So you can see the multicultural society if you go shopping in a food store, or if you go on watch a soccer game, or if you are doing any hobby. And it's not only Vietnamese people, there are many different nationalities. And I think it differs from many smaller communities in Finland because it's multicultural, and because that the people here, or to Närpes, they had already a job when they came. So they come in more directly to the society. They don't have so much refugees or that background. And of course, it's not a university town. They didn't come to study. They come directly into the working life.
Yeah, and that's why it's definitely a good community to also talk about labor migration, because it's people come to work, namely, and not just the greenhouses. I also understood that the other industry as well also employs foreign workforce.
Yeah, the metal industry which are preparing something for vehicles. I don't, I can't explain those things, but they do have more maybe recruited from Bosnia.
Coming to our main discussion today, we are going to focus more about media narratives handling labor migration, and also like kind of try to reflect and learn about how could we handle controversial issues and complex issues in media maybe better than we are doing now. And for the background, let's go a little bit back on the media image we're going to debate. We heard a little bit hints on the video as well. So in the Finnish media, Närpes was quite long portrayed as a model integration city in Finland. So it was used as an example how successful integration process happens, and people come to work and they get part of the community, and how the city council and authorities play a good role in that. And that was quite famous also outside Närpes. This media image, I think, is known nationwide. But then quite recently, in the beginning of this year, there was a case of extortion or usury that came out. So it's still under investigation. But technically what in practical means it meant was that there were people that were taking financial advantage of foreign workforce to get jobs in the greenhouses. So to put it short, this is what it was about. And this filled the media coverage pretty well. So suddenly the Närpes story changed from the very positive into talking about the problems of labor migration and problems in the greenhouses. So maybe we start from the positive case to unpack this like narratives and stories related to it. So Anja, what is your understanding? Where did this model integration brand came from? What is the origin of it?
Why it became such a good example? I think that Närpes really was first in some perspectives. Or that society is one of the first who took refugees in the 80s, and they were Vietnamese refugees in that time. And the community put a lot of effort to really take care of these people. They had kind of a host family for every family that came, and they tried to get them to integrate well. And I think they did, because that's 40 years ago, and some of them are still living there, but now they have children or grandchildren. So that's another part of that migration story. But then the industry with the greenhouses grew, and they recruited more and more people, and somewhere something went wrong.
What is your opinion then that how media got interested about Närpes? How did it, because it became a national thing. So do you have ideas about that?
Maybe it was so unusual that such a small community had a multicultural community. It was even unusual in bigger cities in Finland 20 or 30 years ago, and that's what I was meaning when I said Närpes was first. They kind of made an example for many other societies.
Okay, yeah. Mikko, you're a researcher of journalism and media culture in the Tampere University. And many times when we talk about like kind of media narratives and we try to kind of find what are the challenges, we debate a lot about the negative narrative, right? But what is your kind of perspective that, is there some like kind of risks that we can identify from the very positive narratives as well? That if we kind of instead of handling the complexity of issues, we focus on one side of the story. So is there risks on that?
Yeah, well, I suppose the key issue is that whose narrative are we talking about? Because, of course, in the negative narrative, the problem is that people are kind of given negative roles, and no one wants to be in bad roles. Everyone wants to have a good role in the society, in the narrative. But on the positive narratives, the problem can be that there are no roles for the kind of the negative experiences or the critique. So, of course, this kind of positive image of cities, that kind of cities need to brand themselves in one way or another, and of course they want to give a positive image of how they kind of what kind of people we are, and then these narratives are of course descriptions of who are us and who are not part of us, and then the risk is of course that if there is no place for certain kinds of experiences or certain kinds of people in these narratives, they become kind of left out without roles. So I think it's important that there are also the kind of the counter narratives, the possibilities for people to say that, well, the way you describe my home country or my hometown or whatever, that's not my experience, and then tell their stories as well. Because that can be very fruitful. The critique is, of course, always very important part of developing any society or any community. So that should be taken as a part of the narrative as well, the critical side.
Yeah, that's an interesting. Do you have a reflection on that, what Mikko just said about the kind of the roles and taking into account the narratives?
Yeah, I was thinking about the Närpiö council and community. I think there really was a part, maybe you said you found something about how they were thinking, because I really think that this was an aim for the community. They wanted to build up a positive build a picture of themselves, and mostly it has been true. The people have been integrated well, so it's not an accident that it came out as the positive example.
So it was like our story more to say,
yeah.
Okay.
But then of course how you describe like what is good integration, it's usually things like people adopt the local habits and become part of, like, productive part of the local community. But what about the people who don't fit into that image? Yeah. They should have kind of different kinds of roles. Their voice should be part of this narrative as well.
Let's take Hanna into discussion, because you evidently want to say something. Feel free to comment what they just said. Yeah.
I think maybe the slogan of Närpes would be, if we have some problems, we can solve them. That kind of brand.
Yeah, exactly.
There is roles for everyone.
Okay, sounds interesting. At least it seems that it went through in the media, because this was really a dominating kind of way that Närpes was then, what kind of stories were written from Närpes for a long time. But you are the editor of PoMedia, which is a student media. You have a strategic principles, and you also are devoted to do solution journalism. So how would you approach from this angle the question of labor, migration and integration? What kind of story would you make?
My working location is usually at Etelä-Pohjanmaan opisto in Ilmajoki at southern Ostrobothnia, and we have Etelä-Pohjanmaan opisto is one of the most effective basic education for adults and social integration. And many of these people are at first refugees, but later migrants who want to work and settle down. And the problem in Ilmajoki is that Finns are quite shy and the refugees are active. They want to integrate and Finns are shy and they don't greet the migrants and they go away when someone of these migrants wants to have a working place, wants to get a job. And this is very very big problem there. And we're having common projects with these migrants in Pomedia, and we're trying to make them more, not comfortable, but more known to local people.
So what kind of topics have you handled if you do cooperation with the migrant students and then your journalism students? So what kind of topics do you cover?
We have had topics that are important to refugees. They have decided what we're handling in our news when we have broadcasted news, and we have some kind of international happenings in Opisto, and that's one of the topics we have had in Pomedia.
So if Pomedia would cover Närpes migration case, what do you think the angle would be for the story? What would you go and report?
We would give the camera to one of the migrants and someone who is studying in Närpes, maybe in high school or there is high school. Some of the student, and let him or her tell the story. That's how we work.
Sounds good, and this comes to also the point of that also like kind of whose narrative is it and who is like kind of given the opportunity to talk. Okay, but as mentioned earlier, there was this extortion case or usury case. And in the first video that we just watched, there is Jennifer that says that there was a negative impact on the community, that it affected negatively, and that like kind of they got like also feedback from outside Finland, and now we're not gonna buy Närpes cucumbers or tomatoes anymore, and also like evidently the effect is on of course the business, the greenhouses, but it's also on Vietnamese people. And she was a little bit mentioning that why not to focus the attention on the people that have committed this crime, and why the attention is so broad on the community as such. So if we would like to try to make more balanced interviews from Närpes in this case, let's try to discuss a little bit at how would we cover it, but I give the first word for Anja, that how did you cover the case in Sydösterbotten as a local magazine? How was it?
Yeah, if we first look back and think about those days and what did we do, the police was the first part that we gave a voice, I think. Then the entrepreneurs in the greenhouses as well, because they I think also felt that they had to say something, and then we have made interviews with Jennifer and Tui, and I mean people who are working with migration and immigrants in Närpes, to the immigrants themselves, to young people with an immigrant background who are now representing other young people in the council. But we have not succeeded to reach out to those who are the victims here in these cases. And that's sad, because it would be really good to hear their point of view.
Yes. What about the, of course I know the investigation is still like kind of ongoing and there was some news made of it, but how are you planning to continue now? Like, are you still following the case and like kind of saying the kind of, because if people feel that there's some negative implications on the community, are you kind of planning to somehow handle these as well?
Yeah, Yeah, we are following it. I would say that this is one thing that differs from the local newspapers. We don't forget about Närpes. We live there, and the greenhouses is a very, very big part of that community. So we do cover up, and we have had recently, we had a story now again with the police, but about the investigation and about extortion investigations in general, and how difficult they are to handle, because the police says that they have to, of course, build up a relationship, that these people have trust in the police force in Finland, but then the police has to admit that they can't protect Vietnamese people back in Vietnam. So, and this is one clue, I think, why this has been a difficult case, a difficult investigation.
Yeah, I'm sure that like it, and that's why it's probably going to take some time before it's concluded. But moving to Mikko, thinking like from the researcher's perspective on like how this topic has been handled in the media, what are your reflections on that? From like in general the case in Närpes, do you have some reflections on the media coverage handling this extortion case?
Well, I haven't really analyzed this particular case, so maybe it's a bit also reassuring that from the general audience perspective, the scandal doesn't seem so big, or maybe the damage to the brand of Närpes. Like we are talking about how the narrative has changed, but it may not be that big a change as you might fear, because as normally with the in case of scandals, like if you think like celebrities who are faced with some kind of Twitter scandal or whatever, of course, from the perspective of the person involved, it's a terrible thing, and it feels like your life is changing. But in the big scheme of things, it may very well be that the big narrative doesn't change all that much. So if someone now says that I'll never buy the Närpes tomatoes again, I wouldn't be too worried about it, because few months from now, probably no one will remember that story. So I can't really say anything about how the media in general has handled this particular case, but in general about scandals, they tend to be kind of, well, they pass.
Yeah, people have short memory, but like, yeah, and I'm just mainly talking about how people like kind of feel now, or like what they were expressing about their feelings.
But I think what you said, Hanna, that was like a great idea, that why not turn it into a kind of like widen the narrative, that what you said, that we have problems, but we can handle them, which would be much stronger brand than we are all happy and everything's fine over here. But then if you just take it as an opportunity to kind of widen the narrative and kind of make it, as they say, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade, something like that.
Yeah, but that's a very good point, and leads to the next kind of question, that if we think in general like labor, migration, and how we write about it or how we handle it, we tend to have a bit of like narratives, right? We talk about the hardship on integration quite a lot, or finding work. And we also talk quite a lot in the media about how Finland needs foreign workforce, because we have this like pensioners crisis coming, that we need workforce from abroad. But then normally, as we heard from the video, the reality is quite more complex, right? There is like, there is like success stories, people like integrate, there's a lot of good things going on. Then there's of course also challenges. If we would like to bring this like kind of complexity of issues more into discussion, and maybe try to make more diverse and inclusive content, how could we do that?
I think we need more effort. We can't be content with the first one to interview. We need to work harder and try to find different angles and different people to interview, not just the first one who is speaking good English or is easy to interview, but very different nationalities and different people, different sexes. We need to do more effort as a media.
I think that's really true, and I've done that mistake that I choose those who can speak English, and now I mean last weeks, for example, I was in a greenhouse with flowers, growing flowers, where there is a lot of Ukrainians working. And some of them came now because of the war to Närpes, but some of them have lived in Närpes for many years. And then, of course, when you want to interview those Ukrainians, you go to those who can speak English. And then one of them translated what another one said who had come now because of the war. But that's a point, that we would give a voice to many who have never been heard.
And at first we need to set the goal. We want to have diversity in our media, and then we can make the decisions to interview also others than very good fluent English talking persons.
Are there voices that have been missing from if we think of the coverage now, what are the voices that we are maybe missing? Yeah.
The most common role for migrants is the thankful migrant. You can't be angry or sad migrant in Finnish media. That's bad. Even if the article isn't about being thankful for being in Finland, it must be mentioned how thankful the person is. This is very common in Finland.
What is your perspective?
Angry people, we need angry
Yes,
media.
that's exactly what I was referring to about the narratives that we need. Also listen to the critical voices or that side of the story. And I think that also it's important not to focus too much on people's identities, like always putting people in certain slots, like we need one woman and we need one young person and one elderly, and not so much on the identities, but rather on their fears and hopes and their life. Like that's the usual problem that people get that's where the polarization starts from, is that people are put into opposite identity positions, and then like, can you understand each other? How do you get along? Where if people talk about their hopes and fears, they tend to be very similar across the spectrum. So everybody wants to live in peace. Everybody wants their family to have a good life. Simple stuff. Like they mentioned in the short video clip there, they mentioned the tax problems, that people have problems with filling forms for taxation. The migrants do. So I think that's very relatable to all Finns as well. Everybody knows what it feels like to deal with the tax authorities.
And it was a good point what you said about the identity, because what we have been having this discussion quite a lot during this project with like migrants and journalists, and I guess a lot of what migrants say, that the problem is that when the identity is given to you, that you don't have the self like say on that, but it is that you are now representing, X, Y, and B in this story. So this is also kind of part of the problem as such. Good points. Anja, do you have something to add?
No, not really.
No, not really. So how is it like because you kind of, you live in the community, or you live in Kaskinen, which is close by, but anyway, you are there present in the community. And how are like the migrant population in Närpes, are they also considered as your audience? And how much do you have interaction with them in as the Syd-Österbotten, as your potential audience or the audience, but also the sources for the story? So how does it work?
As sources for the story, sure. And as audience, I would say, of course, all those who read a Swedish-speaking newspaper, because that's of course, one thing that limits our audience very much is that you have to be able to read Swedish. So I had an maybe crazy idea here once that why shouldn't we have someone who was writing, once in a week in Bosnia or in Vietnamese in our newspaper, but then and my second thought was, oh, how could I know what was printed then? And I have to be responsible for that. So I am the one who is limited. But yes, I think we have to do a lot more effort to reach out for more of those who have an immigrant background, but we also have so many already who are immigrants in the second or third generation that of course they are our audience.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. I think we are slowly moving to our break. If Hanna doesn't want to add something, you looked like a little bit wanting to add something from the previous.
No, I'm just planning my next article about angry people in Ilmajoki.
Okay.
Angry refugees, not really. They are very nice people and very thankful, many of them. But I really think it can't be kind of myth that every people has sometimes bad days, or everybody can be sad. That's common for all people. So not anyone can be just happy, and that's also the truth we must show as media.
So also like kind of different sides of the stories to be handled, that we have a tend to focus on certain sides of the story.
For example, how difficult is it to settle down in Finland, to get tax card and open a bank account and these things? That could be very interesting to report.
By the way, before we move on the break, I just want to ask last question, like thinking that how much the audience knows about the migration and integration issues, that like how much you knew about these like challenges they were describing. Is that like kind of a common case, or is this like actually a little bit of the info that we don't much maybe get through the media yet?
The vocabulary is very difficult. People don't usually see the difference between the refugee or migrant. Normal audience, you have to be a teacher or somehow know what's going on actually when you talk about migration or labor migration or being a refugee. It's been very difficult when Ukrainians are coming to Finland as refugees, when we compare it to a few years ago when they came very much etelämpää, mitä tässä sanoo?
From like outside Europe, from
Iran. When people came,
more like southern countries,
when people came from southern countries, it was very different in media and in people's mind. And now the Ukrainians are coming, Ukrainian refugees are coming, and still the vocabulary is difficult to audience, but reactions are different.
Reactions are quite different, yeah. But there's multiple. We're actually going to talk that more in the next week's webinar. But last question before the break, I was just thinking from that how do you see, is that a task of journalism to try to also educate people about migration?
Of course. As a teacher, I think so. How about you?
Yeah, I think I have been written a lot of articles which do have to end with that a refugee is a migrant is we have to bring these facts on and on and on because everybody doesn't know it still.
Yeah, you don't have to frame it as education, but rather that people want to know and they need to know, and it's something that's important to people. So it's of course the responsibility of journalism to tell audience about things that they need to know.
Okay, thank you for following, and thank you for the vivid discussion so far. We are going to have a small break and we are going to continue 5:15. So we have about 20 minutes time to have coffee and refresh yourselves, and we'll be back just now. Hello and welcome back. I hope you had a really good and refreshing break. Before we continue our discussion around the table, let's visit Närpes again. This time we're going to see a video where two young guys, Anton and Johan, will tell a bit more about their life and the multicultural nature of Närpes community. So let's start with a video.
I think Närpes is a diverse and multicultural community because there are over 30 different languages spoken here, and there are several different stores with food from different cultures and so. The community is inclusive and friendly. You can go out on the street and talk to anyone really.
You see different cultures here. That I think is the most fun in Närpes. You see different cultures here.
In my opinion, I don't really have anything against migrants here. It's fun to learn about different cultures, and if they want to live here and have a good life, they should have the possibilities to do that. By law, everyone is equal, but by practicality, the language barriers really hinders that everyone becomes truly equal. I hope that everyone will be equal.
But I know and have friends that from different backgrounds. I have a friend from Vietnamese that I spoke in high school with, and nowadays if he's here, so I speak with him, and we are looking how it's going with each other, how it's life, and what we are doing nowadays.
As a youth council leader, I go to school here, and people can come up to me and say what they think, if something should be changed or something should stay as it is.
We are like representing the young people in whole Närpes. Actually, the leaders in Närpes usually send a proposal or question what we think is the best to the young people. Like if they want to build something, or would be interested to see it on a positive way that they build something. We always put on the social media on Instagram. We have an Instagram account, but also we put like posters in the high school and gymnasium, so they want to know, and if they like know who we are, so they can like just come to us and ask us if we could speak of a thing in the council when we have a meeting, or they send to us that we are very easy to contact because we are in the many different places and communities. So I think that's a good thing too, that we can speak and represent different communities just being in the council. I think it's positive things that I have met different people from different communities and religion. I think you learn more of them and their cultures on the whole world when you know people from different parts of the world. It gives you a wider view, I would think, and everyone finds like their place because there is so many communities here and nice people, and if you don't know where you belong here, there is like this Café Albert. There is many people, different communities that come here, and you can go around, speak with people, and look at where you would like to be, with which community. In Albert, you can like play different board games and card games. That's usually how people start to talk. This is a good place to different communities too, because not everyone has a lot of money. So it's very cheap to eat here too. And if you go to the basement, so here is like a billiard board and a pingis board. So you can play that too. The way the community changes by the immigrants, I think it's positive because there was much work but too little people. So, like in the greenhouses, I think it was a good thing because different countries has like more handwork, you would say. So they almost are made to that job. So when they came to Närpes, like Asian market, it awakened that I wanted to go look, what is it? What do they sell? And it was very interesting to see what different people like in Asia eat. Yeah, I think the immigrants made just Närpes economy people stronger because different people are better on different things. So you learn more how to do things more efficient, better. I think the difference between my parents and me, I'm more open to different people and different cultures. I understand more like the Vietnamese culture and their food than my parents. They are like, how can they eat that, and how can they do that and that? To more people understand that it's not a bad thing that here is many communities. It's just a strong thing, because I know some people think it's a bad thing that it's many communities, that here should just be people from Finland here, but I think because it's so many cultures, it just make Närpes more unique and stronger place and just a funner place to be in.
Yes, that was a couple of insights of how it is what kind of community Närpes is in the eyes of the youth. And it was good that they pointed out also about the change, right? That they still know there's differences between them and their parents, and how you approach new cultures and difference. So it was interesting to discuss with the boys. So in the sense, Närpes is quite a unique town, thinking of the life as a young person, because in not so many places in Finland you actually get that diverse community when you go to school and among the peers. So I wanted to ask, maybe first from Anja, that youth in general are also a bit underrepresented, very hard to say in English for a Finn, group in the media content. In any way, we don't write so much about youth or youth matters. Are the migrants as well, quite underrepresented sometimes. So what are your reflections? Do you work with the youth in Sydösterbotten?
Yes, we do, but we should do a lot more. They are underrepresented, and I really do look forward to the summer when we older people get on our summer holidays, and we will have a lot of young journalists and journalist students among us, because I think they will bring in those angles and have the right contacts to do more and to find the topics that engage young people more. But then still I have to say that I would so much like to repeat what Johan here said at last. He said Närpes is it's so much more a funny place because of this international community that it has grown into, and that's true. So for young people, I think they will they are more proud of their city when it's like this.
Yeah. Hanna, you work on daily basis with young journalists or future journalists. So thinking of what Johan and Anton just described, and in general from your hands-on experience, what kind of topics are young people interested in when we talk about migration or integration? Is that a topic for them?
I think multiculturalism and going global is interesting when we talk about going as an exchange student or having an exchange student in Finland. As a student media, we are of course interested in this kind of internationality things in schools and universities of applied sciences here, but I think we must also emphasize also this immigrant and refugee point of views, not only this exchange student point of views. And I also have an idea to get correspondents abroad when some Ostrobothnian people go to exchange, and they could write us how they see the new country as immigrant.
To also cover the Finnish migrant abroad perspective.
Yeah, because Finns can also be migrants.
Yeah, we many times talk about this, that then people don't necessarily identify as being migrants when they when they move to another country from for example from Finland, but it's actually is the same thing. Yeah. But thinking like that, can you kind of reflect a little bit at what topics would be then interesting for young people, like kind of concrete examples that what you think that the young people would be interested to discuss about these things?
Maybe hobbies, activities, what could we do with immigrants to integrate them? That would be interesting maybe, because hobbies always are interesting to young audiences. That's what journalists do when they want to get young audience. They write about hobbies and activity possibilities. Maybe that's interesting when trying to get these two audiences together.
Johan and Anton are both like members of youth councils. So technically the youth council is a body of young people that are voted to the position that's supposed to have a certain consultative role, at least in the council's decision making. So I was just starting to thinking of youth as a minority as well. What about this side, like engaging the youth, diverse youth, like the kind of Finnish youth, migrant youth, to talk about more about the politics or the decision making or about the policy processes? What about that?
Well, actually, young people are also interested in the same topics as the main audience, so they don't really need special news. They need the same, but more about the things that are more about news of them subjects, topics. For example, if there is a new law that is about young people, that's what we should make news, and that's the politics, what's interesting to young people. I would say the integration is fulfilled when we have Vietnamese in young council in Närpes. So politics is also an important topic to make news.
Okay. So maybe we move to Mikko, and you're like the member of the Conciliatory Journalism, which is called Sopiva in Finnish.
Yes, the Association for Conciliatory Journalists.
Yes. Do you want to quickly first say what you're doing as an association, to explain shortly?
Well, to put it short, it's a kind of a forum for Finnish journalists who are interested in this kind of approaches, well, we call it conciliatory journalism, but there are different kinds of terms for it where we kind of try to find better means to deal with sensitive or conflict-prone topics. So it's not just about kind of bringing people with conflict together and trying to deal with the conflict, but it's actually about diversity as well. And we talk a lot about diversity in the media as a tool for kind of dissolving the conflicts. And the basic point is to kind of resist or restrain polarization and to not make journalism in a fashion that feeds and fuels polarization, but rather try to resist it somehow. So diversity has been one of the key ways to address this.
Yeah. According to your experience, we talk about the groups that are underrepresented, okay, migrants, youth. Is there some other groups that are that don't get their voices heard as part of the media coverage, and how can we somehow measure this? Can we measure this?
Well, first the big question about who is underrepresented is, of course, it depends a lot on the topic. So I think the basic question is to ask as a journalist, or if you kind of want to find the underrepresented groups, is to ask if we are talking above someone's heads, if we are discussing someone's matters without hearing them themselves. And then there are, of course, restrictions, like you mentioned, the language barriers, that there are people who are difficult to listen to or to get to speak for themselves because perhaps they don't share language with us, or if we talk about animals, for instance, we talk above their heads because they can't speak the human language.
That's so true.
So there are different, this kind of underrepresented groups, like the world is full of underrepresented groups in different kinds of topics. But then about the measuring, we have in Sopiva, and actually now at the moment, there's a researcher called Matleena Ylikoski who is working with her dissertation on the matter of developing a diversity meter. And to put that short is the kind of, it's a data tool that measures already published news, kind of analyzes the archives of media houses and analyzes who gets to speak in what matters. So if you push in, like, say, NATO, and then you find who gets to talk about NATO in the Finnish media. And up until now, it has been quite narrow topic. Now, in the past couple of months, of course, it's widened. But it's not like we can try to measure it, and it's never perfect. And in questions like ethnicity and immigration, it's very difficult to measure because the tool, it has difficulties recognizing names and people from all the cultures. But what it does is that it kind of puts the focus on the issue of diversity, and that's the most important thing that it achieves. Before the break, we talked about how we need to put more effort into making news more diverse, or the mediascape more diverse, and bringing in voices that we usually don't hear. And just having a meter is like bringing the issue to the table, that now in the newsrooms people kind of get the idea that, oh, maybe we should think again if we are talking above someone's head, or always asking the same people who are like talkative and fluent and good with the language. And when you recognize that, oh, it's always these three people that we talk to, then you can put in the effort to diversify the discussion.
What have you used the meter so far, or what kind of results have you have tested it, right, with some meters?
Yes, it's still under development, but it's in, or Matleena actually at the moment is developing it together with, maybe it's best if I don't mention the media houses, but big Finnish media houses and newsrooms, where they are kind of working together to recognize where it can be used and what are the most difficult things, where it maybe cannot be used, or how to develop it further. So it's already, this development process has been very, very kind of educative, because we have gathered journalists from these media houses to talk about how they think about diversity, how they usually do it as everyday routines, and then what could they do differently in the future. So that's part of the human intellect is a very important part of this data tool, I think.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And according to my understanding, there's not really like consensus about like what is diversity in media context yet. How have you defined it? What is diversity?
Yes, well, of course we can talk about diversity again in various things. I think the most obvious thing that we have been in the Finnish discussion, we have talked about the gender balance, about men and women in the news. And like, for instance, Helsingin Sanomat has published articles about how they try to develop their gender balance. So that's one issue, but the meter that we are developing tries to also take into account like ideological balances, like different political parties in Finland, how they are represented in different matters, and also experts like university researchers or professors or other researchers, other experts, like who gets to speak in what issue.
Alternative to Esko Valtaoja.
Yes, that's
I remember that campaign.
Yes.
Yeah, that was Kaskas Media's campaign about alternative for Esko. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the basic idea, that we have certain issues that kind of journalists go into automatic drive that, okay, this is about reality television, let's call Mikko Hautakangas or something like that. You kind of know who to call. And if you have a meter saying that, oh, we have asked this same person 18 times already, then you just stop and maybe Google the next expert.
What about your reflections on diversity? Do you discuss diversity as such in your editorial offices?
Very much. We try to get different representations because very often we have white men talking in media, also in Swiss, and very boring things. We need more. Youth
perspective.
Yeah. We need more young people, women, handicapped, immigrants, refugees, brown people. We need more variety, and we talk about that a lot in Pomedia.
So for you, diversity is kind of many different things. It's religion, it's ethnicity.
Yeah, of course.
It's like, so you kind of mentioned many different aspects.
Yeah, and I think this the animal point of view is a good point, because that's really, we don't have that at all in Finnish media. We need this.
What about Anja? What is your...
I recognize the discussions, yes, but it's mostly about age and gender, and that's true. And we should have a lot more, and then we kind of, there is something happening in the society, and then we remember, and then we go back to the routines and call those experts we have called before, and they are, that's typical, that we kind of get an alarm clock ringing sometimes. Oh, it's Women's Day, now we will have some...
Let's ask Esko things.
But then we fall back into the routines again. Mm-hmm.
But this is interesting, and it's an interesting initiative that there could be actually a tool that you could also like kind of use for this, because it's not so easy to monitor as the daily.
We're also
work.
Interested in that tool. Not that big media, but interested.
Yes, but moving on. Thinking of the understanding of community, I think like what I kind of felt quite strongly in Närpes, like with the short visit, is that people though like have this like kind of sense of community or sense of different communities. I think many people actually talk that the Närpes consists of different communities, and there is still like kind of course difference between the migrant community and then the people that they feel that they are kind of locals, but then they feel that there's interaction. But thinking of how communities are formed, right? Of course, it's formed in interaction on a daily basis. When you meet people, you talk with people, you go to work with people. But then media plays quite a big role in that what is your understanding that who belongs to this community and who doesn't. So it also, media discussions somehow like contribute into this building of sense of community. So let's start from the top down this time. I asked Mikko that what kind of perspective do you have, like that what kind of role the national local medias play in this community building? What's the media's role?
Well, as for the national or local, we know that the local media is very important because that's the most trusted media. People trust the local media a lot, and local journalism is in that sense very valuable and often neglected. When we talk about journalism and media, we tend to talk about the national media. And then, of course, if you think about how does the national media brand the local communities, or what kind of picture they build, of course, well, I'm coming from Tampere area, so we always think of the cliches, and we are proud now that we have the new hall, and we have the tram and everything like this, nasi neula or whatever. So it tends to be very cliche-ish, or that kind of a...
Icons.
Yeah, and in that sense it builds the local communities as the others talking about us. And that's important. We know that we Finns love when we are mentioned in the foreign media, and then we are all very proud that, oh, Finland has been mentioned. So that's one sense of building the sense of locality and sense of being us. But what I see is a very important role of the media is the role of local journalism and local media Also these days, not just the journalism, but also social media groups and different kinds of local publicities that are very important in the sense of what is, that's more like us talking about us then.
How do you see that, Anja? Do you have a role in the local community building in Närpes?
We are a part of it, at least. I don't know, I hope we have a role. We want to get into people's minds and homes and be a part of their life. But as a media, we of course are a reflection and we bring the news. It's not our job or mission to build the society, but we are a part of it. That's how I see it.
How do you feel? Does it somehow come with responsibility, or is this discussed that like kind of what is the thinking that okay, people follow and get media and get ideas and reflect themselves against the narratives? Does it come with responsibility? You kind of partly already answered that you don't see that that's media's role, but other reflections. Do you think of this, that if we write this or that, how does it reflect on the community?
I think media is somehow responsibility of the community because you can't be that critical as if you'd like to be when you write a local paper. You can't be cruel or even critical if you write about local markets or anything new that's happening when the place is quiet and there is not so many people anymore in the village. You have to be some kind of positive and try to keep it vital.
So you see that the media has a role in somehow in this, like?
Yeah, the role is, even though it isn't a nice role.
Any reflection on this?
I think we can be critical. We cannot be cruel, but we can be critical. I wrote something a couple of weeks ago, which I know is against what many in the church council in Närpes thinks, because they are like more conservative. And there is a discussion in Finland, as you know, that if you could marry in church with some of your own sex. And so I made pääkirjoitus, what's the
editorial.
The editorial text about this topic. And I wrote something critical about the church council in that town where the paper is published. So I think we can be critical, but we cannot be cruel.
In some things, but you can't be critical enough to places and restaurants, for example. That's just that's bad thing, but you can't be critical when you try to keep them alive. If you want to have your job.
Yeah. So somehow that's kind of
we are influenced, but that we are living, almost everybody in my colleagues, I mean, they are living there, and it's a small community. So if you have the trust for the people, you have to build up that trust so that you will give more. They give you more interviews, and and in that kind of way, you are a part of the community yourself.
This is an interesting discussion in that you are actually there and you face people every day. Mikko, you had some comment on this. Yeah.
Yes, I would hope that being responsible or being critical wouldn't be kind of oppositions or opposites of each other, because the way I see it is that the role of being responsible, the local journalism can be responsible in kind of building the community, can also be the role of opening the different narratives, like we talked about, the narratives maybe getting too narrow. We talk about the local people in a certain way. So to widen those narratives and also to question them and bringing the critical point of view, or challenging the local social media narratives or something like that, that could be a very responsible and critical way of local journalism to support the community, not challenge it. Or it can be challenging, but it doesn't have to be like deconstructive.
Yeah, but sometimes, often journalism is about mistakes and accidents. That's why we are here to talk about what's wrong in the society. That's the main point of journalism. And sometimes you lose the ads if you are too critical to local mainostajien kanssa on ongelmia.
Advertisement. So you're mainly talking about this, like kind of more about the challenge, that how it is actually to kind of bring new like angles on the media agenda, right? That because like that certain topics, because of the ownership of the media or the advertisement or the business logic behind, is kind of restricting you. Is that what you're trying to say? As a journalist?
And you always need to make also positive articles, not only critical. There is kind of need to be positive to get advertisements.
Okay, so there is this aspect. But don't you think that the local media should also be brave?
If you want to keep your job, you can't be too brave.
This was actually, wasn't this like one of the critiques that Finland got now just a week ago in the World Barometer of Press Freedom, is that one of the things challenging the press freedom in Finland is the economic pressures. So I guess what you're describing is exactly that it's narrowing the space for action for journalism, that you have to like, earn your salary from the local companies.
It's kind of the self-censorship that is the issue in the Finnish media, right? That what they are saying, that would be like different reasons. Okay, but this is an interesting point of view. So do you see that the media has a role, though, that if you are student media, info media, do you see that you have a role to build some sort of a student community? Is that your role?
Yeah, I think that's one of the goals of Media. But students are very, very different. I mean, the group of students includes very different persons. They are different ages, different gender, different backgrounds. So the target isn't easy, but that's what we're doing. We're trying to do to connect students into regions.
Coming back to being brave, thinking that you're a little bit disagreeing about this, that you said that it's your role to really like, even though it's difficult and you have to face the consequences because you live with the people in the same community. So how is your standing like about being brave and as a local media?
As you said, if we want to keep our jobs, that's what I was asking my colleagues when I wrote about this article or this editorial for an, I said as an example. Then I have to ask my colleagues at first, because they have lived there for long, that will we have an audience still after I have published this? and that's more, I mean, in my opinion, we have to be brave to bring in those new perspectives or even mention things that we do know many there maybe are thinking something else about. But still, when we bring in these new things, we have also to consider the audience we have. So that's the balance for the journalist. And that's why I asked my colleagues, will we have an audience still after tomorrow?
And do you?
Yeah. We have had some negative reactions, but more positive, I think. And I think we have to be brave, but it's a balance.
And thinking of like in the context of migration and integration, right? There can be a lot of controversial issues that people would like need to be kind of able to know enough about to be able to make decisions about them. So in that sense, I guess that you kind of have to be brave to a certain extent to be able to bring new topics on the agenda.
As a student media, we have this opportunity to be brave and critical because we are just learning to be journalists. And we don't have ads, so we have kind of different freedom to local medias, actually.
Okay, so in that sense, like it's a bit of a difference compared to previous experiences. But this has been an interesting discussion also, like that how does what things affect also the work as journalists on the local level. Any more reflections you would like to share? We are soon starting to close for today. Who wants to have the final word? Mikko, what would you say? Concluding about, because we were talking about underrepresented people in the media, and you said that depends on the context, but thinking of how do we report about migration in general? How would you conclude that?
Well, maybe my main point would be about kind of talking about the fears and hopes rather than identities. So that's kind of my key take on this, is that we tend to talk about like how do you integrate with the food and with it, do you like going to sauna or do you enjoy the summer cottages and all kinds of things that are really at the core of people's identities. And these are very difficult to actually bring together. So I think that when we start to talk about what's important to you or what are you afraid of, then we find kind of the common ground, and that's where it's easier to integrate. Everyone wants their children to go to school and get a better life than they have themselves, and to be healthy and have a long and prosperous life. So that's what I say. Ask people about their hopes and fears. And not be afraid of dealing with the fears either.
Yes, so be brave and ask people about their hopes and fears. This is a good conclusion. So, but that's a good point. Like, this is a different aspect to start like talking about the topic and finding new stories and new narratives.
Yeah. Let them be angry if
they
are.
Are. Yeah. And let people be angry if they are. That's good. We are slowly closing. Thank you so much for following. Thank you all for a good discussion. It has been a pleasure to have you here. We are continuing next week. Next week on Tuesday we are going to be in Tornio, where our theme will be border. So we are going to talk about cross-border movement and different border talk in media. So let's see you next week Tuesday, and thank you for today.